Tonight on CFTK-TV News, the city of Prince Rupert suffered another water main break. A survey shows how many Canadians are feeling about their financial situation, and a major Nova Scotia fire may have been human-caused.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cal Maslin, and here's what's making news in the Northwest and beyond for today. The city of Prince Rupert recently released some information that isn't unfamiliar news to local residents, but is never pleasant to hear about. Back on January the 10th, Seal Cove Circle suffered a water main break in the early morning. The cause is said to be the result of the extreme cold that hit northern BC, Prince Rupert included. But despite the break, there was no change made to the city's drinking water status. However, the break did affirm the concerns of the Prince Rupert Mayor, Herb Pond, who was worried about how the city's pipes would hold up in truly cold weather after they went through a truly horrendous break in October of last year. And Prince Rupert also continues to wait for $82 million in funds from the Federal Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund that they applied to get back in the summer. The Prince Rupert RCMP are currently in the midst of investigating a case where an arson took place at a local golf course, or more specifically, the Prince Rupert Golf Club saw several pieces of their equipment, including a truck, tractor, and golf cart, get intentionally set on fire late at night on January 13th. And estimations for how much it would cost for those pieces to get replaced have maxed out as much as over $150,000. According to the RCMP, this was likely an arson due to the fact that perpetrators broke into a fenced-in area where all the equipment was stored. For anyone that has more information on this crime or any other in the Prince Rupert area, you are asked to call the Prince Rupert RCMP at 250-624-2136. Premier David Eby says expanding British Columbia's electrical system is an economic and environmental opportunity the province must use to its advantage. He says a planned 10-year, $36 billion expansion of BC's electrical system by the public energy utility Crown-owned BC Hydro will also ensure there is ample power to supply the province's growing population. Eby says BC Hydro's plan to build up the electricity system will be attractive to investors looking to locate in an affordable clean energy jurisdiction. He says the investment involves building new high-voltage transmission lines, expanding and constructing substations, and upgrading BC's dams. There have been a lot of questions about why TransLink didn't use tire socks on its buses during record snowfall this past week. The wraps are designed to help with traction, but CTV News learned that TransLink didn't use any at all. Here's St. John Alexander with more.
No matter where they were in Metro Vancouver, none of the buses that were trapped by Wednesday's unforgiving weather were fitted with the polyester wrap that's supposed to be a snowfall's formidable foe.
Did you think you'd get stuck?
No, honestly I didn't with a 40-footer, but it's just too slippery.
You just kind of wrap it around.
Billed as light and portable, tire socks were part of TransLink's winter preparedness event, designed to show off all of its snow-worthy goodies. But CTV News has learned despite all of this, the socks were kept tucked away in a drawer, so to speak.
There are drawbacks to them, which is part of the reason why we don't have them on most of the fleet.
In fact, TransLink has said all along they would only be used in limited areas with steep hills, like a few routes on the North Shore or at SFU.
Mainly on a couple targeted routes.
That's because they're not durable. They're only good for a few hours or about 50 kilometers, and they can't be used on pavement. Still, TransLink has 120 pairs because the socks are excellent at freeing trapped buses. They also provide great traction, but again, only for a short window.
They were never really meant to be a major component used in the fleet at all times because they do require a number of resources, they take time, and they do slow the bus service down.
If they're so limited, why were they shown off at your winter preparedness event?
The winter readiness event that we held back in November displayed and showcased a number of tactics that we use in the winter season. The tire socks are just one of the tools that we deploy.
They were not deployed at all on Wednesday because TransLink says it's testing its new winter tires. A sharp eye might be able to spot their deep treads, but it's unlikely anyone will see tire socks around downtown. St. John Alexander, CTV News, Vancouver.
Coming up next, a homeowner reacted to not-so-kind words about his place of residence. Welcome back. A homeowner on the island is speaking out after he got a letter in the mail calling his home revolting. But different reaction is now pouring in. CTV's Brendan Strain has more.
In 2020, Walt Vanderist and his wife bought a 1914 built home on Monterey Avenue in Oak Bay.
We originally thought we were going to renovate.
Although those plans were quickly dashed after it became apparent the house was beyond repair. That's when the couple decided to build new.
And then you can get what you truly want.
After settling on a design, the couple completed this home in February of 2023.
Most people were quite positive. A few people would walk away and go, well, it's not for me. And I go, okay, thank you.
Earlier this month, Walt and his wife received an anonymous card in the mail.
I was somewhat taken aback.
It read,
"Shame, shame, shame on you for building such a revolting home in Oak Bay. How did it ever get approved?" I couldn't believe it when I read it. It was too funny.
Walt has a thick skin and actually found humor in it.
So somebody went to the store, bought a card, got a stamp, and went through the process of actually going through that much trouble to hate on our home.
He couldn't resist posting the letter on the Oak Bay local Facebook page, along with a cheeky thank you to whomever it was that took the time to send the card.
There's been amazing amounts of support.
Hundreds of comments of support, showing that not everyone feels the same way as the cloaked calligrapher.
Anonymous letters are worth about as much as the name attached to them.
The mayor of Oak Bay says the worst behavior always comes anonymously.
We don't accept anonymous letters to council for that reason. You have to have your name attached to it.
He says the idea that a modern build doesn't fit into the character of a neighborhood is completely incorrect. In fact, it's what creates the character of the neighborhood in the first place.
If you walk through our streets, you can tell the era that they were built by the design. And so I think that's the charm, honestly.
Walt's not dwelling on it and says he finds the whole thing absurd.
I can't carry something like this around with me and make it rule my life.
You happy?
Very happy.
And at the end of the day, that's what really matters. Brendan Strain, CTV News, Oak Bay.
A BC researcher is currently in the midst of exploring just how human-created noise is affecting fish. Here's CTV's Anna McMillan.
There are a lot of vessels that pass through waters like this, interrupting important conversations between the animals who live here. You hear about orcas and the ferries and shipping traffic, but it's not limited to whales. UVic researcher Mackenzie Wood says we can't forget about fish, like the plainfin midshipman, which she studies near the Olympic Peninsula. So we have underwater microphones called hydrophones that we put right outside of their nests. And then we can drive the boat around and compare the recordings from when we were driving the boat to the time directly before and after the boat. What she found, they vocalize less when there's boat noise. Normally, they're a chatty bunch, grunting to keep intruders away from their nests and humming to attract a mate. So they might not be able to protect their eggs or lay any at all if their calls for a mate aren't heard.
So it is really important to capture these underwater soundscapes sort of like as a baseline before the sounds of many of these species are masked by human-made noise or worse, before they disappear.
Conservationist Valeria Vergara says slowing vessels, limiting traffic in sensitive areas, and using ship quieting technologies are highly effective.
Some of them are being used, luckily, and it's more, more industry and more people have to begin buying into them. And I think the more education there is on this matter, the more that will begin to be the case.
Which is why she says the research Woods is doing is so important. There is so much potential with this field because noise is quite easy to mitigate. Unlike plastic pollution or ocean acidification, as soon as you stop the noise at the source, it's gone, allowing underwater sounds like this to continue. Anna McMillan, CTV News.
The last few years have been financially difficult for many Canadians, but what could be expected for this year? CTV's Martin McMahon is taking a look at a new survey that shows Canadians are running short on both cash as well as optimism.
Whether it's groceries, the price of a meal out, or buying a new car, life has gotten a whole lot more expensive in recent years. And that's not even getting into rents or mortgages, with borrowing costs surging as interest rates have climbed higher. Now TD Bank has released a survey which is giving an insight into how we're feeling about all of this.
Compared to last year, we found that nearly 4 in 10 British Columbians reported feeling less positive about their finances, and nearly 6 in 10 foresee inflation and the rising cost of living as their biggest financial challenge in 2024.
And that lines up with what we're hearing on the street.
As far as us, we just noticed the rise in prices for everything.
Price of groceries have gone up quite substantially.
But for the newcomers and the kids growing up, so difficult for them.
So what are people going to do about it?
Now, that has led to British Columbians changing their budget and spending habits. So we also found that nearly half, 46% of British Columbians are planning on cutting back their monthly budget.
And that means more shopping around, less spending on entertainment, and cutting back on subscriptions.
So I'm eating a lot more rice, but yeah, it's not looking good.
I thought the other day maybe I need to drive to a place where the prices are much cheaper.
I mean, I've had to make adjustments in some ways, but nothing major. Other than considering travel this year would probably be more within the province or within Canada.
As for who could be the biggest loser if people actually follow through and cut spending, the finding that 71% of those polled plan to buy less will likely be setting off a few alarm bells in the retail sector. Martin McMahon, CTV News, Vancouver.
Turning to tonight's weather, the North Coast is set up to see mainly periods of rain as well as a low of 1 degree. The Terrace-Kitimat area is supposed to end up dealing with snow, and their low should be at -6 degrees. And the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District is forecast to see quite a bit of snow of their own, but their low will be down at -14 degrees. On the North Coast, the upcoming week for them will entail rain and pretty much nothing else, with the high moving from 3 to 6 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, their week is currently said to be getting mostly just snow and some potential flurries, along with their high shifting between -4 and 1 degree. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, their next week or so is likely to get a good mix of flurries and a high that goes from -10 to -1 degree. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is slippery sections, utility work, and different types of maintenance, plus the Usk Ferry is out of service and the cable car is in effect. Highway 35 and 118 have slippery sections too. Highway 37 has some slippery sections as well, while also having bridge and shoulder maintenance. 37A has slippery sections and utility work, some more slippery sections on the Nishka Highway, and the Telegraph Creek Road has more slippery sections with compact ice. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, changes made to work structure during the pandemic are still having far-reaching impacts. Welcome back. Last year was Canada's worst wildfire season on record, and a lot of that was fueled by devastating fires in British Columbia. But unusually, Nova Scotia also faced a brutal season, and now we're learning that one person is accused of starting the biggest fire that province has ever seen. CTV's Creason Ajakote reports.
The largest wildfire in Nova Scotia's history, officials say, has been caused by a single person.
We charged an individual, a male individual from Shelburne County.
The Barrington Lake fire started in May of last year and grew to more than 23,000 hectares, forcing more than 6,000 to flee, destroyed close to 50 homes and another 150 structures.
It was pretty devastating for the area. We have never experienced anything like that.
22-year-old Dalton Clark Stewart of Villagedale, Nova Scotia is facing 3 charges, including lighting a fire on private land without permission, failing to take efforts to prevent the spread, and leaving a fire unattended. This legal expert says it's important to note the charges are not criminal.
The penalty is possibly, I think, 6 months or 50,000. So it's much more of what we call a regulatory, or what's also called quasi-criminal offense.
The Tantalent fire that destroyed 151 homes started just days after the Barrington Lake fire. Nova Scotia RCMP concluded its investigation due to lack of evidence, but the province says theirs is still ongoing.
The Forest Act does allow us up to 2 years to lay a charge.
In Quebec, 38-year-old Brian Parlé admitted to starting several fires in the areas of Chapet and Chibougamau in northern Quebec last spring. Police say as the fires burned, Parlé allegedly falsely claimed online the government started the fires to convince the public that climate change was real. Researchers say the majority of fires in Quebec last summer were caused naturally. Parlé is in custody following a check on his mental state, while Stewart in Nova Scotia will make his first court appearance in March. Chris Nachkate, CTV News, Halifax.
The number of Canadians who are still working from home continues to fall, but as CTV's Jeff Keeley tells us, that shift to remote work at the height of the pandemic is still having a far-reaching impact.
The number of hours people are working from home is dropping, but the pandemic practice is having some long-lasting impacts.
Well, there's definitely a decline, I feel, since, a year and a half ago.
Statistics Canada says across the country, the percentage of employees working most of their week from home was around 40% in April 2020. That fell to 30% in January 2022, and as of November 2023, 20%. Employment agency Staff Max says there are fewer remote work offers compared to the middle of the pandemic.
We've seen definitely a shift in sort of candidates' expectations that there isn't as much remote work out there, but they're still wanting it.
Still, the home office for some may be here to stay. The report also shows as people return to the office, not all of them came back for the full week as hybrid models started gaining ground in 2022.
We're going to see a long-term effect fallout from this because it's more difficult to sell these larger buildings. It's going to impact taxes eventually on assessment values.
StatsCan says since 2020, the work from home model created a reduced demand for transit. In Canada, ridership fell from 12.6% in 2016 to 10.1% last year. The report also says the pandemic years may have helped the environment. It's estimated driver commutes could be down by 2.6 million over the last 7 years.
We definitely reduce greenhouse gas emissions by having a work from home option or that option becoming more available.
Jeff Keel, CTV News, Winnipeg.
A long-standing math problem deemed impossible for decades has been solved with some Canadian help. It involves a tile that can cover a surface without creating a repeated pattern. CTV's Spencer Turcott has more on a mysterious 13-sided shape.
But 10,000 is not the cube of a number.
Tucked away in the corner of Craig Kaplan's desk is the answer to a decades-old math problem.
The first stirrings of this problem in mathematics were in the early 1960s.
The question:
whether you could tile the plane in a way that never repeats using a single shape.
Puzzled some of the world's top minds. Mathematician Hao Wang put forward the belief that an aperiodic monotile did not exist. That notion remained until Craig and some of his international colleagues cracked the code.
I chose the best possible route to achieve that, which is sit around and wait for someone to email you.
It's that email that alerted Craig to the existence of the hat, a new shape that resembles a fedora.
In these blue hats, the pointed side is on the right, here, here, and there.
So what makes this so special?
It's a shape that we can show can cover the entire plane without ever leaving gaps or overlaps. So it's a tiling. But in any tiling that you can make from this shape, you never get regular repetition in like a grid.
The hat has made noise around the world, recently finding itself in Time magazine's Best Inventions of 2023, an achievement with practical applications too.
There's been an incredible response from all kinds of hobbyists and artists and designers and craftspeople turning these into real-world objects. And one example that I love is right here. So this is a soccer ball.
While Craig insists there is nothing magical about the discovery, he hopes at the very least it shapes our mindset when approaching problems in the future that seem impossible. Spencer Turcotte, CTV News, Waterloo.
And now we turn our attention to the stock markets. The Canadian dollar is up 23 cents. The price of gold is up $7.70. Oil is down 70 cents. Natural gas is down 16 cents. Aluminum is down $14.50. In Toronto, the TSX is up 149.79 points. Venture Index is up 1.15. In New York, the Dow Jones is up 395.19, and the Nasdaq is up 255.32. Still ahead, the Canucks had a very successful return back home. Welcome back. The Canucks returned to Vancouver for the first time in more than 2 weeks and sent their fans home happy.
And he's in on the right wing. Got Dakota Joshua going to that. There's a pass. Joshua scores in his own rebound. One hands.
Dakota Joshua's career-high 12th goal of the season was enough to give the Canucks the win on Pride Night. It vaults the team back into first place in the NHL with 64 points so far this season. The Canucks' 5-game homestand continues Saturday night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. The president of Coast Mountain Bus Company says it's disappointing the union representing the company's transit supervisors in British Columbia's Lower Mainland is threatening a shutdown of all services. Michael McDaniel says Coast Mountain has made the same wage offer already agreed to by all of its other unions and says the company is urging the union to come back to the table with realistic expectations. CUPE Local 4500, which represents more than 180 bus workers, says it's been waiting for more than 4 weeks for Coast Mountain to respond to its latest proposal. It says its patience is exhausted, and unless an agreement is reached, all services, including the C-Bus, will be suspended by 3 a.m. on Monday for 2 days. Police say the man whose car plunged from the second floor of a UBC parkade is dead. University RCMP say the man was pronounced dead at the scene after his car crashed through a concrete wall and landed at ground level back on Wednesday. 10 emergency vehicles responding to the scene as crews needed to stabilize the situation before getting to the victim because a concrete barrier was hanging above the car. No one else was hurt in the crash, and the cause is still under investigation. A Canadian-built underwater observatory is now in the water north of the Antarctic Peninsula. The equipment is about 23 meters deep at a Spanish research station on Livingston Island in the South Shetlands archipelago, where it is expected to stay for years. Cohen Bauer, a senior staff scientist at Ocean Networks Canada, says the Southern Ocean Observatory will collect data for years from a stationary spot to help researchers spot changes in conditions. The project is being jointly run by Ocean Networks Canada out of the University of Victoria and the Spanish National Research Council. That's all of our news for now. From all of us here at CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.